Alright everyone, I'm going to show you how to build a BluesBreaker from scratch and a couple of mods like extra bass, extra gain, and we'll try some different clipping diodes and see how that changes the gain structure. For this build, we're going to need two 6.8K resistors, one 220K resistor, three 4.7K resistors, one 1K resistor, one 3.3K resistor, two 1 meg resistors, one 2.2 meg resistor, two 47K resistors, five 10NF capacitors, two 220NF capacitors, one 100NF capacitor, one 47PF capacitor, one 100 UF electrolytic capacitor, four diodes. These are 1N4148. One of these diodes, this is a 1N4001. The Opamp, this is a TLO072. The potentiometers we're going to be needing is 100K linear, 100K audio taper, and a 25K linear. We'll need some stripboard and all the other stuff for the enclosure, like your choice of 1/4-inch jacks, a DC jack, a triple pin double throw true bypass Footswitch, and an enclosure of your choice. If you're going to be doing the mods, we're going to need two 22NF capacitors for the extra bass mod, one 330K resistor or higher for the extra gain mod, and your choice of diodes in the clipping section. I'm going to try LEDs and see what difference that makes. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is prep my board. I'm going to have to cut it down to the proper size. First thing I'm going to do is square my board off and then cut my size that I need. Okay, I only need 10 rows going down, so I'm going to count 10 rows. And mark the 11th row. I'm going to be cutting the 11th row because we need all 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're going to be cutting that one. Alright, we have our 10 rows, and we need to have 21 holes going left to right. So I'm going to count 22, and I'm going to cut the 22nd line because we need all 21. Okay, now I have 10 rows by 21 holes. Next thing I'm going to do is mark where all our cuts are going to go. I like to get a Sharpie and stick it in the hole where the cut's going to go, and mark it that way. So starting on the top row, we have the 5th hole. I'm going to mark that 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to stick it in the 5th hole, mark it like that, and I'm going to go all the way down just like the diagram. Alright, we have all our areas that are going to be cut. The cuts are going to happen on the back side, on the copper side. I like to mark the back side as well, so it makes it easier to identify which trace is going to be cut. But I like marking the top side because that makes it easier to better align where our components are going and our jumpers. So next thing we're going to do is cut the traces. You could put a razor in there and turn until you dig all that out. I find it easier to use a metal drill bit. And just like we marked it with the Sharpie, we're just going to stick it in the hole and give it a few turns. Until the copper is dug out like that. I'm going to go through and do all our cuts. Alright, after all our traces are cut, there should be 19 cuts in total. And we want to triple check everything before we start cutting, but make sure all the holes are in the correct spot. Now we can put in our 3 jumpers. For jumpers, I'm just going to get some extra resistors and cut the legs off of them. So I cut the legs off of the resistors, and I'm going to use these as jumpers. So I'm going to get the first jumper, and I'm going to match it up just like the diagram. I'm going underneath on the bottom row, underneath our trace, our cut right there. And we're going to be skipping 1, 2, 3, 4 rows up, and it should be above our other cut. That should look exactly like our diagram. Next, I'm going to get another jumper, and from the top row where our cuts are right there, again just like the diagram, skipping 1, and it should match up to our diagram. Now our last jumper, we're going to match it up just like our diagram. Triple check everything, make sure that's exactly where our jumpers are going before we solder everything up. Alright, our board is prepped, ready to go. Now we can start putting in our components. Let's start with the resistors. Let's start with the 47K resistors. The first one's going to go on the bottom row, second line over. We're skipping 2 rows. So it should look like that. The next 47K resistor is going to go to the left of where our jumper is. Again, skipping 2 rows up, if that's in the right spot. It should look like that with one row empty above it. The next one we'll do is our 2.2 meg resistor. That'll go next to that resistor right there on the bottom row, but we'll be skipping 3 holes, so it will go on the next one up. Okay, the next thing we'll do is get our 1 meg resistors. It's going to go next to these 2 resistors here. We're going to skip 3 rows from the bottom. And it should look like that. 3 empty rows on the bottom, 3 empty rows on the top. The next 1 meg resistor is going to go on the bottom row to the right of that cut there. And we're going to be going to the 3rd row above it. Alright, should look like that. Again, we're matching up just like the diagram has it. Next resistor we're going to do is the 3.3K. And that's going to go next to the last resistors we just put in here. Skipping 4 rows from the bottom. Skipping 2. So it should look like that. Alright, next we're going to get our 1K resistor. And that's going to go horizontal on the top row. We're going to skip 2 holes, insert, skip another 2, and it should be like that. Again, triple check everything, make sure all the resistors are going in the right holes. Now we're going to do our 3 4.7K resistors. Okay, this one's going to go next to that resistor there. And it's going to go all the way to the second to the bottom row. Our next 4.7K is going to go underneath this one right here, underneath our 47. And we'll be skipping 2 rows. And then our last 4.7K is going to go to the right of our jumper on the next row down. And that's above the cut. And we're going to go up to the next row above the cut above that, if that makes sense. We're just matching up to the diagram. Next we're going to get our 220K resistor. Now this is the resistor that we change in the extra gain mod, so you can use the 330 or higher and achieve more gain. We'll do that at the end of the video. That resistor, our 220K, is going to go above our jumper, skip 2, and on the top row. And the last of the resistors, we're going to take the two 6.8K resistors. That's going to go in the bottom, the second to the bottom row, in between our cuts there. And that's going to be skipping 1, 2, 3, 4 rows above. It should go in above our cut. And then the last 6.8 second row, we're skipping 2. And it should be above our cut. Everything should be matching up to the diagram. Alright, next we're going to put in capacitors. We're going to get our 5 10 NF capacitors. The first one's going to go above our first resistor here, skipping 1. Our next one is going to go underneath our 3.3K, skipping 1. And the next one is going to be going next to our cuts on the left, like that. Again, we're matching it exactly to the diagram. Okay, our next two 10 NF capacitors go on the right side over here. This is the capacitors that we change for the extra base mod. So if you want to do the extra base mod, use the 22 NF capacitors instead of these 10 NFs. I'm going to be doing stock, and then in the demo I'll use the 22 NF. So we're going to take our 10 NF capacitor, where our cut is there, I'm skipping 1. Then I'm going to be skipping 2 more rows. It should be going above our cut. The other 10 NF is going to go next to our last capacitor on the bottom, skipping 1 row up. Next, we're going to get our 100 NF capacitor, and that's going to go above our 6.8K resistor, the last one there. Top row, skip 1 down. Alright, next we're going to get our 220 NF capacitors. One's going to go next to our 4.7K resistor on the left. Skipping one row down. Our next 220 NF capacitor is going to be going underneath our jumper right there, and it's only going to the next row down, which is a tight spacing for the distance here, but we can always bend the legs, and I'm going to show you how I bend these for a better fit. So I just bent the legs of the capacitor, or at least one of them, into an L shape, and that brings the distance of the legs a lot closer together, and that'll make it fit in the board a lot cleaner and flatter. Next, we're going to get our 100 UF capacitor. When you're looking at a electrolytic capacitor, the long stem is the positive, the short stem is the negative. The negative is also usually marked by a stripe of some sort on the canister that shows you what side is negative. We're going to put that where it goes. We're going to be putting the positive up, so the long stem up, the short stem down. You might have to squeeze yours in there. Don't be afraid to bend those legs to get it where we need it. Now our last capacitors, which is the 47 PF, that's going to go right underneath our 1K resistor, second row and third row. Alright, all the capacitors are in. We want to be triple checking everything as we go along. Make sure everything's in its right spot. Next thing I'm going to do is solder in the op amp. We're going to place that where that goes, and that goes above our two double cuts that look like a domino there. Oh, and then make sure the orientation, there's a little slit, a little cut, a half moon at the top of the op amp. That's going to be facing up. That's the orientation on the diagram. So make sure that that half moon cut is facing upwards on our board. Okay, once we have the op amp in place, quadruple check this, because these can be hard to remove if we're not using a socket, so we don't want to make any mistakes here. I've been doing all the soldering in fast forward. This part I will do in real time, so you can see how I take my time soldering up the op amp, because that is temperature sensitive. So I'm going to be soldering a leg, giving it time to rest, and then soldering on another leg. I'm soldering one of the legs now, letting it rest for a few seconds. Then I'm going to solder a leg on the opposite side. Again, letting it rest a few seconds in between each solder. Letting the part cool down in between each one. Even if you can solder fast, it's probably still not fast enough to create too much heat. Alright, I think that is all 8 pins. Yes, it looks like it. And the part doesn't even feel warm because I took my time there. Next thing we're going to do is move on to the diodes. And again, these are heat sensitive, so we're going to take our time doing the diodes just like the Opamp. I'm going to start with the 1N4001. The diode has a line, a marking on it to show what side's negative. We're putting the negative side up, matching it just like the diagram. That's going on the second row on the top. Skipping 3. And I'm also not putting the diode all the way down to the board. I'm going to install it like that with the diode in the air a little bit, and I'm going to be using the legs here kind of like a heat sink so the heat doesn't damage that diode. Soldering one leg, letting it rest. Soldering the next leg. A few seconds in between should be good enough. The next thing we're going to do is solder in our 4 clipping diodes. These are 1N4148. Just like the other diode, one side is marked with a stripe so you can see what side is negative. The stripe side is negative. And we're going to put them in like the diagram shows. The spots where they're doubled up in the middle, we're going to push both ends of the diodes in there and make sure that the orientations are lining up. So the first diode here on the left, the stripe will be on the bottom. The positive would be in the center. For the next diode on top of that, the negative stripe will be in the center and the positive on top. Okay, so I'm getting a diode, the stripe on the bottom. I'm putting that on the second row on the bottom there, and going into the center of those 2 cuts like the diagram. And I'm getting my second diode, again with the stripe facing down, That's going to go in the center. I'm going to squeeze that in with the previous diode, and the positive is going to go to the top row. All right. Hopefully you can see that when I zoom in, but it should look just like the diagram. Also, this is the clipping section. This is where you would be putting LEDs in place of the clipping diodes. You can put LEDs on one side, silicon diodes on the other. Just make sure the positive and negative match up to the diagram, and I'll be showing you those mods at the end of the video. Alright, I'm going to solder the center one up first, the doubled one. We're going to let it rest a few seconds. Solder the bottom. The top one's already been resting, so we can hit that one now. And we're going to repeat that same thing on the next diode over, except the diodes are going to be reversed. The negative is going to be on the top, the negative stripe, and the positive on the bottom. Alright, so I have the negative stripe on top. That is going on the top row, and in the center of our cuts I'm getting my second or fourth diode, and again the stripe on top, that's going to be going in the middle with the other diode, and to the second of the bottom row. Alright, yours should look like that. Notice on the left side the negatives are on the bottom. On the right side the negatives are facing the top. Soldering the center lugs together. Letting it rest a few seconds. Soldering the other diode. The other one's been resting, so we can solder that up. Okay, there is the BluesBreaker circuit. All that's left to do is to put the wires in and put it in the enclosure. Alright, I have all my wires pre-cut and color-coded to the diagram. Depending on your enclosure, your wires might be different sizes. All of these are 4-inch. If you have trouble sourcing the colors, you can always use white wire and color code them with a marker. So I'm going to get my orange wire and go to the very top right corner like that. Then I'm going to get a yellow wire on the next row down and another yellow wire on the third row down. Next thing I'm going to do is get our green wire, skip 2 rows. That should be lining up with the bottom of that capacitor. a yellow wire, skipping one more row. And then our black wire, which is a ground wire on the very bottom. Alright, yours should look like that on the left side. Triple check everything, make sure all the wires are in the correct spot. We'll move on to the right side. Top right corner, white wire. Blue wire, which is our output. We're going to skip one row down. So that's on the third row. Orange wire on the next row down. And another orange wire on the following hole. So like that. Matching up our diagram. Red wire, our power wire, goes on the next hole down. White wire goes on the next hole down. And then our last white wire, we skip one row. Alright, yours should look just like the diagram. Triple check everything to make sure all our wires are in the correct spot. Alright, next we're going to prep our switch before we go install everything into our enclosure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small jumper wire across the bottom outer lugs there. Alright, we should have our jumper wire across the two bottom lugs. Then I'm going to get a green wire. This is our input wire. This will be as long as you need it to be to go to your input jack. So this input green wire is going to go on the center left lug like that. And our blue wire, that's going to be our output wire. That's going to be going to our output jack. That's going to go on the center right lug like that. Next, I'm going to get a black wire, a ground wire, and I'm going to put it in the center middle lug like that. That'll be our future ground for our LED. Alright, yours should look something like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put our parts in our enclosure. Now I want the layout to be volume, tone, gain. When we turn it over, it's going to be reversed, so it's going to be volume, tone, gain. So I'm going to be putting the 100K log right here on the right side. That's our volume. So our 100K audio taper. That goes on the right side there. Our 25K linear pot is our tone. That's going to go in the middle. And our 100K linear is our gain. And that'll go on the left. Alright, so I have it marked VTG, volume, tone, gain. Volume, tone, gain. I'm going to put the rest of the hardware in. Okay, we should wire up the circuit to all the components and make sure it works, and do the mods that we want to do before we mount this permanently into the enclosure. But since I know that this circuit works and I have a prototype that can swap in parts later, so we can hear what all the mods do, I'm going to go ahead and mount it now. Again, we should wire it in first, make sure it works, and then mount it. What I'm going to do is get a business card and some hot glue and just glue the circuit down on top of it. Then I'm going to get some double-sided mounting tape, a couple of pieces. You can use whatever mounting method you want. I like this. This is simple, this is easy, and provides a nice spacing of insulation so nothing gets shorted out. Okay, mine is pressed in the middle of the board. Double-sided mounting tape. It is not going anywhere. Now, when we're looking at a potentiometer this way, the lugs are 1, 2, 3. So we're going to match up the colors of our diagram on our wires to the corresponding pot. So our orange wire that's on the top left, that's lug number 3. So that's going to be our left lug on our tone pot. Alright, we have our orange wire there going to our third lug. Then our orange wire on the right side, that's going to be the one on the top here, that's going to be our first lug. So the one on the right side. Alright, next we're going to get our next orange wire, which is lug number 2. So the center lug. Alright, we have our orange wires wired up to our tone. Now we're going to go for our yellow wires on the left side. So the one on the top, that's lug number 2. So the center lug of our gain. Our next yellow wire, the next one down, that's going to be lug number 1. So the one on the right side of our gain. And then the yellow wire on the bottom, that's the lug number 3, so the left one on our gain pot. Alright, our yellow wires are now touching or soldered onto the gain pot. Now we're going to move on to the white wires on the right side. The top white wire goes on lug number 2, so the center of the volume. Alright, the next white wire, the one in the middle, that is our first lug, so the one on the right. And then our last white wire, the one on the bottom, goes to lug number 3, which is on the left side. Alright, all our white wires are now on the volume. Now we're going to get our green wire, which is our input effect wire, and that's going to go to the top left lug on our switch above our green input. So it should look something like that. Next thing we're going to do is get our blue wire, which is our output wire, and that's going to go to the top right lug of our switch above our blue output wire. So it should look something like that. Now the green wire coming from our left center lug there, that's our input wire, and that's going to go to the tip of our input jack. And we're going to do the same thing with our blue wire on the right center lug. This is our output. That's going to get soldered to the tip of this jack, our output jack. Alright, now our ground wire, that center wire, that's going to get soldered onto the ground of either jack. Ground is ground, so it doesn't matter if you get it from the output or input, as long as it's touching the ground lug. Alright, now we have our ground wire from the center lug touching ground. Next thing we're going to do is get our power line, which is the red one, and we're going to touch it to solder it onto the sleeve of our power jack. The center pin is negative, the outer sleeve is positive. So we're going to get our red positive and solder it to the sleeve of our output, our DC power jack. And we're going to get our ground wire from our circuit board, and that's going to go into the center lug of our DC power jack, center pin negative. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a black ground wire, solder it to the center pin negative of our DC jack, and that's going to get soldered to ground either on our output or input jack. Okay, now we have our ground wire from our center negative of our power to our ground. That should be the whole entire build except for the LED. If you want to add an LED, you're going to need an LED of your choice, your size, your color, and the corresponding resistor. No matter which color I use or style, I typically use a 1K resistor. But what we're going to do for an LED is we're going to solder another red power wire from the sleeve of the DC jack, so the 9-volt sleeve. And I'm going to solder the power wire that we just soldered on. I'm going to solder that to the long stem of the LED. The long stem is positive, the short stem is negative. So I'm going to be soldering the red wire onto the long stem. Now, on the short stem of the LED, I'm going to solder a 1K resistor onto that side, which is the negative. And the other side of that resistor is going to go to the top center lug of the foot switch. Okay, and that is how we install the LED. I didn't put this in a specific hole in the enclosure. You can put that wherever you want it. I didn't install it in this enclosure because I'm actually using a different style LED. This is the most traditional one, so this is the one I'm showing you. But let's test it out, hear what it sounds like, and in the demo I'm going to be switching the capacitors so we can hear the extra bass mod. I'll be switching the resistor, the 220K for a 330K for extra gain. We'll hear the difference of that. And then we'll change out some of the diodes and hear what difference that makes. Okay, this is the pedal we built on screen. I'm going to do a quick test just to prove that this works and that the build is correct. Then I'm going to switch over to this prototype board I have over here. I have sockets in the areas where we're going to be doing the mods, so I can change out the capacitors, resistors, and diodes on the fly. and we can hear what we like, what we don't like, so you can choose which mods you would like to do. So let's do a quick test to make sure the circuit works. All right, the pedal works. All right, this is the stock BluesBreaker. The gain is on max 100. The tone knob is about 60%, 65%, and the volume is about 75%. We're going to be using the Ditto to have a consistent riff for every single mod. Let's hear the stock first, then we'll do the extra gain mod, which is the resistor, then we'll do the extra bass mod, which are the capacitors, and then we'll change out the diodes for LEDs and see what difference that makes. Okay, so I'm going to remove the 220K resistor. And I'm going to replace that with the 330K resistor. Okay, the settings are remaining the same. Let's see if that made any difference at all. Okay, I heard a little bit of a volume boost and maybe just a little tiny bit more gain, but more so I heard a slight volume boost, which was nice. Next, I'm going to replace these two 10 NF capacitors with 22 NF capacitors. This will give it extra bass. Okay, this is the extra bass mod. Again, all these settings are exactly the same. We should have a warmer, thicker, smoother sound. Okay, that was good. It did sound warmer without the bass sounding woofy. So I think that is a better overall tone. Next, I'm going to change out these diodes. First, I'm going to change out one set, then both sets. What I'm going to do is change out the set of diodes that are on the left with one red LED. When you're looking at an LED, the long stem is the positive, the short stem is the negative. So I'm going to remove the set of diodes that are on the left side. The positive is on the top, the negative is on the bottom. And that's how I'm going to be putting the LED in. I'm going to be putting the positive on the top row and the negative on that second to the bottom row. We're going to clip and remove that center where the two diodes touch. That's just a jumper point for the diodes. The LED can just go straight from the top row to the 9th row. The long stem is going to go on the top, that's the positive. And the short stem will go on the bottom, that's the negative. So now we have one LED, one red LED, and two silicon diodes. They're both at this point 2 volts, so they're symmetrical, but they're going to clip differently. So that's going to give it some added harmonics and get it slightly closer to asymmetrical, even though it is symmetrical. Let's hear what the LED diode does. Okay, I definitely heard more gain on that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change out the other set of silicon diodes with a green LED, which is 3 volts. Again, the long stem is the positive, the short stem is the negative. And we're going to be putting that in where the old diodes were. So the short stem negative will be on the top row. The long stem positive will be on the bottom 9th row. So since the red LED is 2 volts and the green LED is 3 volts, that's going to give an offset of voltage, which is going to be asymmetrical clipping. Let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, that was pretty similar. I hope that you can hear that slight difference through the microphones, but in my opinion, that sounded the most natural, and it was ever so slightly louder as well. You choose which mods you like, and I hope you enjoy your build.